Another harrowing tale of utter brutality, this story plumbs the depths of darkness contained in the human psyche as we open on an operatic voyage.
Tibaldi.
You win.
My turn.
To what must be the old lake house, a simple pleasure for the waspiest family alive. Not much could warrant interrupting family game time, except rolling up for a little playful banter with their weekend golf chums.
You're still on for 10 tomorrow, right? Still coming?
What?
BFFs forever, I'm sure. With all that settled, they're very soon at their property line, gently passing through their pristine gates. They settle in quickly, opening windows to air things out, trying to calm Lucky, their nervous dog, and preparing to launch the boat. Fred arrives shortly to help, as promised, and introduces the Georges to his boy Paul. Soon the old salts are working in unison, bringing the old girl back to life. Inside, Anne is busy as a bee, preparing the week's meals by portioning out her meat log. She tries to convince some friends to come over to visit so they can make this a party log, but the jury is still out on that one. Georgie enters the kitchen to announce ominously that there's a visitor at the door. Now, I'm not sure how you would handle this situation, but she finds what seems to be an amiable, soft-spoken young man who is supposedly there on behalf of her golfing buddy, Mrs. Thompson, to borrow some eggs. She's happy to oblige and he's sure he can handle it, but he rushes off and, like a sloppy little bitch, spills his load of embryos all over the joint. He seems beside himself with remorse over this inconvenience and tries to brush this off while pretending like she knows how to clean up a mess. Then they have a bit of a standoff over the topic of relinquishing additional eggs and whether he should use the carton before he inadvertently drops her phone into a cold bath, which then leads to an icy farewell. But soon after Peter leaves, Lucky's incessant barking announces Peter and Paul's return. Peter is scared of dogs and theirs caused him to lose his consolation eggs. They don't make it clear exactly what they're looking for, but this may be partially due to Paul getting distracted by their genuine Callaway drivers, which he has never had the privilege of swinging. We'll be circling back around on this, but from now, after practically begging her to let him take one for a test drive, he steps outside and his absence is soon followed by the sounds of canine distress. This gets George's attention and he goes off to investigate. Meanwhile, Anne has reached her limit of sassy lads for the day and outright asks them to leave. They are aghast at her boorish behavior, as well as her resistance to helping them understand where they went wrong. Luckily for everyone, George shows up to adjudicate the situation. You see, it's a simple case of a misunderstanding about eggs. They just want the 4 eggs they were promised and they'll leave. There aren't many facts available, making it difficult for George to mediate.
I can hardly play the mediator if I don't know the facts, now can I?
But those damned eggs, they always reveal the true nature of their requestor. That's an old proverb. Ultimately, Paul gets a little too familiar, which unleashes the beast in George. But he is not actually about that life, we see. Peter is a med student and he offers to take a look at that injured leg to help alleviate the discomfort. George declines, and now he's also back to politely requesting the 2 boys leave, if they don't mind. Instead, they propose a simple game of memory recall.
What is this?
But it's not just any ball, it's the one he didn't hit since he tested the club in a different way. What way, you may ask? That's revealed at the conclusion of their follow-up game of Hot or Cold. Anne wins the game engulfed in flames, and her prize is a dog carcass rolling out of her car. We then become witnesses to a familiar situation in reverse, as Anne now calls out to Betsy, the friendly boater, to get her party to come ashore. She plays things cool, as instructed, but concludes their interaction with a slick little promise that she'll swing by to say what up later that evening. This is a little time bomb she insists will pay off within a couple of hours when she doesn't show up, so they better watch out. The boys, however, are unperturbed and get the family settled in for game night. After all of this unpleasantness, Paul attempts to hit the reset button on their relationship, but once scorned, they all find themselves right back in their original positions. George finally gets down to asking what this is all about, but the motive is deeply rooted, and thinking about it tends to get Peter all emotional. They tell a few lies, and ultimately, all we can figure is they're just a couple of spoiled little twats, troubled by the constant traumatizing emptiness of their mundane existence. To rectify that, they have planned several games to play, with an overarching bet that the family will all be dead within the next 12 hours, although they are hesitant to take them up on that.
I mean, what do you think?
You think they stand a chance?
But me? As they consider where they want to take this next, Paul gives Peter the old playful squeeze and pinch on his jelly rolls. This causes the conversation to turn uncomfortably to the subject of whether Anne has any extra calories stowing away on her body. She attempts to exert control with Georgie in tow, which only draws further attention to them both. This prompts them into a game of cat in a bag. Once they're all settled, we learn this is a game of moral decency, you see. Young Georgie is being protected from witnessing what happens next. With their stranglehold of control, they compel the elder George to affirm the necessity of following their commands. So, sickened by her ineffectual husband, she disrobes. Once she has been debased, but confirmed to be fit, she is instructed to get dressed again. In the process of all this, Georgie wet his pants. Their desire to keep him from being alone with these sickos leads to a brief struggle, during which he manages to flee. They spend their time casually, securing the adults and pursuing him upstairs. But they don't know that he reads a lot of Spider-Man and has already climbed down the outside of the house and taken to the water. Meanwhile, Peter remembers the original egg situation and goes to see if he can find the remaining stash. While he's gone, they try in vain to release the bonds. When he comes back with the eggs, this batch also falls to the ground. He seems intent on not upsetting Paul with this new mess, and Anne misconstrues his gentle nature and begs for release, promising they will portray the events here in a favorable light so no one gets in trouble. We'll have to wait and see if she gets an acceptance on her offer. Georgie ends up at the Thompsons' house with Paul following close behind. He recognizes he's leaving a trail as he goes, so he ditches his pants and shoes. Then he runs off to find a place to hide, but as we all know, hiding too well can get boring after a minute. But all his skittering about pays off because he finds Mrs. Thompson and her shotgun. However, after Paul confronts him in the upstairs hall and is even a good enough sport to instruct him on its proper use, he receives no benefit. They eventually make it back to the relief of the parents. Paul tattles on the young man for trying to kill him, and then they decide that it's time to get down to business. Peter counts off, and while Paul goes to find himself a snack, sounds of gunfire and violent struggle emanate from the other room. When he returns, Paul admonishes his friend for shooting the person counted rather than the one who's left after the count. Real amateur stuff. They then thank their hosts for a lovely evening and head on out. Anne appears to be the lone survivor amidst the carnage, but when she, through great effort, manages to hobble out of the room, it is then revealed that George is also in some state of partial aliveness. His moans of agony alert Anne to his present condition, and they quickly work on getting ambulatory in case their attackers return. It's clear that he's not going to make it anywhere on foot, and they presume the front gate to be locked, just like the front door. Anne then discovers that her phone is on, although it doesn't seem to be able to call out. The hope is that drying it out real good will get it into functioning order. So, after a brief moment of intense forgiveness, she gets George set up with a little drying station to work on that. Meanwhile, she gets some clippers from the greenhouse and makes a hole for herself in the fence. Now, I'm not sure about you, but in the planning phase, they did mention George having his own cell phone in the car. Wouldn't you want to rule that out as an option? But they're not in their right mind. And anyway, he works on the phone for a bit, and after a thorough drying of the internals, is able to make an outbound call. However, he never gets any confirmation of whether the emergency responders can hear him, and the battery essentially goes dead before he can try again. Meanwhile, Anne is out having similarly bad luck. Despite her screaming, she can't find anyone willing to help. Also, she's crippled with fear, so when a potential salvationary conveyance approaches, she cowers behind a tree. Then, when she builds up the courage to step into the light and face down whatever comes, we'll find out more about that momentarily. Back at the house, George thinks he hears something. Oh good, it's just a golf ball. But hey, Anne's back. The boys have brought her with them to finalize their bet. Peter counts off again, and in observance of the proper rules this time, lands on George. But the new game now involves Anne getting to choose whether she will stand in for George and what weapon will be used. It's a very generous offer, but still a difficult decision. To help her along, they give a little off-screen preview of the knife. She can end his suffering with the shotgun, but now the game is that she has to perfectly recite a prayer. She doesn't actually know any, so Peter hooks her up with a choice one to memorize. And after getting her all set up, she nails it. But Paul starts jerking her around, talking about how she has to say it backward and stuff. And she decides instead to spill the contents of Peter's stomach all over the floor. A shocked and alarmed Paul attempts to demonstrate his absolute control by searching for the channel changer. And when he finds it, uses it to turn back the clock to where he started on this particular decision branch. This time, with the gift of foreknowledge, he keeps Anne honest in the spirit of the game. But with game night coming to its conclusion, he takes one more step toward winning their bet. As a new dawn rises, they go out for a relaxing sail around the lake. Anne takes one last go at cutting herself free, but is always under the watchful eye of the boys. They bring her into the fold, and then Paul dumps her over despite having another hour left before the bet's time limit expires. It's been a long night, and he's feeling a bit peckish. Then they pull up at the Red Dock, previously identified as belonging to Betsy the friendly boater, and he goes to see if anyone's home. She is, and after reminding her that they met at Anne's house the prior day, she lets him in while she goes to see if she has any eggs to lend. Well, that was brutal, but if you're looking to go deeper than that, be sure to check out this next video. And now that we're here, I want to congratulate you for making it to the end of the video and affirm that you are a very special person because of it. And if you enjoyed the video, I would love for you to become part of the channel by subscribing. Thanks for watching.